Look, detectives combing through the hood looking for a corpse. Draco hitting, I don't think your body can endure the force. I whipped the fish up with a fucking hanger or a fork. Told that bitch, go ahead, sniff what you want, there's plenty more to snort. I had an outstanding warrant for a short. Turned myself in, rocking Louis and all my jewelry, I wore the court.
Good afternoon, Hard to Kill podcast. We have David B. Armstrong from the military office here today. David, how we doing, brother?
Good. Thanks for having me on. It's good to meet you. It's good to connect with other podcasters too.
I know, right?
There's a lot of us out there, and then there's also a few of us out there. And I've gotten to know Justin Kramer real well from former Action Guys, and it's just amazing how I've become friends with people through this platform that I would have never really gotten to know otherwise. So it's really cool.
Honestly, for me, man, I've never been like a open guy, someone that's crazy about talking. And this has been just a pleasant surprise for me. Everyone said that I need to start like talking to like-minded individuals and this and that. And, I was kind of hesitant and I would drag my feet a little bit, but honestly, this has been the best form of whatever you want to call it, help, or, PTSD, whatever you want to call it. It's helping guys. It's helping me. And I love, once again, I'm from Massachusetts. I don't have a lot of military people around me. As you know, military, we're spread out all over the place. So I think this is a great new way to just have like-minded conversations. And also it's a great new way for like young Marines or young military members to look at what, other experiences and what other guys did to try to tailor their career a little bit. I wish I had something like this to follow.
Yeah. It's been awesome. I mean, I've met so many cool people, that I would have never met before. And then I start meeting like Instagram people and I'm like, oh, I know the handle, but I don't know the person.
Yeah, I know. Right.
So like, I've become good friends with like Adam Crick at Goons Up and Seamus Flynn.
I love his page, dude. I love Goons Up and Constellation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been awesome. So, really a lot of fun. And, I'm just kind of looking through you look at the Instagram real quick and it's like the people that I've gotten to know on here, like the Communicator and Phase Line, man, that dude's such a great artist. I don't know if you follow. Yeah. I don't know him personally. Frankly, I'm not even sure we've chatted on the phone, but he did some artwork for me and I just love and frankly, I would have never gotten to know these guys ever had it not been for social media. Kind of getting together.
When it comes to art in the space, I'm definitely a huge Ben Cantwell fan. I don't know if you've checked him out.
He did the Moments in Leadership main, what do you call it, logo, whatever. If you go onto iTunes or whatever, that's a Ben Cantwell piece.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and he did such an awesome job. I think we started out, actually, I did talk to him on the phone a couple of times because I was like, hey, I kind of need something that's like can convey leadership in some sort of form, but not just be an infantry guy. And, because I want to have, Army guys on and Air Force guys on and all that kind of stuff. And so it can't just be some Iron Mike thing, but it ended up looking like Iron Mike, but it's really cool anyway. So it's awesome.
What was his process like? Was he just cut and dry? You tell him what you're feeling and he just put it on paper?
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of, I went to him and I said, hey, here's what I'm feeling. I would describe it totally different now because having been through the process of trying to communicate in words what an artist puts on paper, I mean, the onus is not on the artist, the onus is on the idiot that doesn't know how to explain it like me.
For sure.
So I'm like, I fucking machine guns and shit, you know, that's me, right? Like, and he's probably just sitting there with this, you know, piece of paper and a pen, like waiting for me to say something valuable that he
like
can
a
use.
keyword for him to go off. Yeah.
So I would describe it totally different than I described to him at first, and this is a recollection of the whole thing. But basically, I needed something that was basic, like a square. I couldn't, you know, just because logos on podcasting and graphics and all this stuff, it had to be square. And then he made this great background, and then I found out that okay, I can't use that on like a printed T-shirt because it prints the background and everything. So I had to go back to him and say, "Can you print me a clear one?" and all that stuff. Like I would totally do it different now, knowing what I learned about it. But he was so cool, and you know, like a lot of people who just have a skill and then get paid not only for that skill, but for the time that they put into doing whatever it is. Like you're paying for Ben's time and talent.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? So a lot of people are like, dude, can you change this one thing? Like that's time, right? And so he was awesome. He was like, hey, you know, I'll cut, you know, because I made some mistakes and I asked him and stuff, but he was super easy to work with, super great guy, super fair with. I feel like if he wasn't a veteran and I went back to him and asked him for like essentially was a change order, he probably would have just slayed me on the face,
exactly, right? Yeah,
but,
definitely a good dude all around.
Just really, really awesome dude. So and then Lopez did a graphic for me that I've used a couple places too. It was more of like a melding of like World War II current leader. It's a beautiful piece of art. It just ended up not really conveying what I wanted to. And then when I started the whole thing, I just got some dude on Fiverr for $25 to make.
I know. I just figured out how to use Fiverr too, dude. That's a great resource.
It was a great way to get started, you know. And then, I mean, I'm sorry, we're getting off on a tangent here, but I use Fiverr for, right, you know this, but podcasts can be pretty either time intensive or you outsource the work to somebody that becomes
definitely
like financially expensive. And I have a job, right? I run a company, so I had to trade money for time.
Gotcha.
And I found some guys on Fiverr to do like the sound engineering and the editing and all that kind of stuff. And then I cobble it.
Dude, honestly, that's probably 70% of it. Audio is so huge in this game. I had no idea until like jumping in head first, but Jesus, I need to get that right big time.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm talking in like an interview, like first person, like a in-person interview, because I want to do some of my stuff outside. I want to do some stuff in specific areas, and you know, audio is just so huge. Yeah.
It's like, and I discovered it's the sound engineering is one thing, right? That's like taking an audio file and making it sound really good. So every time I turn on Howard Stern on Sirius, I'm like, why the fuck can't I sound that good? I mean, like that's all sound engineering, right? And then there's the actual editing, the cutting and splicing and getting stuff in and out and lining it all up. And that's time intensive too. So that takes me about I spend an hour on every 15 minutes of audio. So my whole Saturday is gone if I don't outsource it.
Seriously.
It's been fun. And look, like brought guys like you and I together.
I know.
Shit,
no, you know, we definitely live in a very, very cool time, because just to be able to do this, man, I think something great is going to come out of it, honestly. And I guess we're just nerding out over our like little hobby here, but I've seen nothing but positive things come of this, and it's helping
and social
people.
Media.
Yeah.
Not just podcasting, right?
No, for sure. That's actually where I was going with it. And you know, we both come from a time where social media was non-existent, and even just whipping out a camera was, you know, you got looked at.
You were
like
a loser if you were taking pictures, right?
A dick on your head. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right. And now they're the most valuable. You know, pictures I've got. So
that's now looking back at it from a lens of being out for a little bit, I kick myself for not just keeping one right here at all times, dude, because those are the best moments of my life. Even though some of them are the most traumatic, they're also the best moments of my life. So to not have them to just cherish and hold is just a huge detriment. But let's try to shift gears a little bit here.
Yeah, sure.
Just to give my audience a little bit about you, let's dive into your career. Let's just get the meat and potatoes. I don't want to do the whole generic your story, what happened here. Just tell us who you are, where you went, and what you did.
Right. Well, you know, at the risk of somebody who's listening to this and not watching it, I mean, they're going to hear this and they're going to imagine that opening scene from Saving Private Ryan with the 75-year-old guys in the cemetery, right? And then it flashes back to his youth. But yeah, man, I came into the Marines. First, I decided to join the military at two different points in my life. The very first, I had my grandfather was a Navy Corsair pilot in World War II. And then his son,
super cool.
I know, he was a flight surgeon. Dude, he was the first person to ever test the ejection seat.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Like if anybody hears this and wants to see pictures of it, go into my Instagram.
Oh,
like,
I do. You
scroll
definitely
down.
gotta send me one just so I can put it in the edit. That's
Dude,
awesome.
Yeah.
That's badass.
And like, so because I don't have the picture, I'll just describe it. But like, this just goes to show you the times, right? So it was in the late 40s. And they wanted to do this with a flight surgeon who could, I don't know, provide some sort of insight over the physiological impact of putting a bunch of dynamite under a chair and firing it off what looked like a roller coaster thing, right? like the incline to start a roller coaster. They shot him out in the Pensacola Bay and he broke his back. But there's a picture of him getting shot up that thing, and he's got his khaki uniform on with his fucking tie on, no helmet,
of course.
his chukka boots, it was like he rolled out of the CP and jumped on this chair and they fired him off in the bay, like no life jacket, nothing. Just shot him off this thing. So funny how the times are totally different now, right? Like now if you walk outside without your safety eyeglasses on, you'd get
tell me about it.
Yeah, all for the better, I suppose. But so his son, my uncle, then became a Marine officer. And so he got commissioned in the mid 60s and was immediately sent to Vietnam. He was an Amtracker, but was immediately sent to Vietnam. And as an Amtrak platoon commander, then became an infantry platoon commander. And then, so he spent a lot of time, he was in Operations Hastings and all that stuff.
Oh, wow.
There's actually some really cool stuff on the internet that I found recently. He passed away a couple years ago.
Sorry.
But anyway, to move the story along, at some point in the 80s, he was in his battalion command of 3rd Tracks out there in Pendleton. And I was in high school, like, I don't know, let's call it 10th grade, right?
Yep.
In trouble, either in the principal's office or in the back of a police car.
Yeah?
Right? Oh, yeah.
You're one of those?
I was a troublemaker. I was kind of looking for attention. Which probably plays a lot into why I thought going to Marine Corps would be really cool. Because joining the Air Force, you don't get a whole lot of attention for that. But
yeah.
Sorry, all my Air Force friends. It's a big joke. So my uncle says to my mom, "Hey, why don't you send Dave out here for a week for his spring break, and I'll drag him around, show him some of the stuff in the Marines." And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool, right?" So I go out for what's essentially like a 3 or 4 day dog and pony show that my uncle puts on as a battalion commander. And I have no idea the gravity of this, right? I'm just some kid walking around. And of course, my uncle's like probably tasked. This poor lieutenant that I got, he was like, drag my nephew around with you. I mean, that poor guy. But he basically lashed me up with this Amtrak platoon commander. And I went out to the field for 3 days in an Amtrak with an infantry company. Yeah. Could you imagine doing that today?
That's badass.
Some really cool stories from that. And this is back when night vision was kind of new. And of course, my uncle, as the battalion commander, he had a set of night vision.
What did night vision look like back then?
Oh, okay. So it looked like a shoebox that went on your head with 2 tubes that came out of the front, like something out of Star Wars, like I think it was like the PBS 5 or something. You probably Google it, but it had these 2 tubes that came straight out of the front, and it was literally like goggles, almost like those Oculus things that you put on your head now.
Yeah.
You strap around your head. So he's like, "Don't lose these." So I go out there, get into this Amtrak. And for anybody that's been stationed at Pendleton, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But those Amtraks have like that trail that runs right along the 5, coming out of Del Mar and like up towards Red Beach, where they can go underneath the highway through that tunnel. And this is their first battalion night move. They're moving the entire battalion of Amtraks. Every single track that was running in the battalion went, and they drove the tracks all the way to Case Springs, which is far, right, on Pendleton. And I don't know how an Amtrak operates all that well. It was a P7, so it was the same version that we have now, like totally different guts on the inside and everything. The turret was different, but they had something called a fishbowl, which was like a weird red thing that they could see in. and the headlights from the fire were washing it out. And so I don't know, probably somebody like you, some like corporal, some sergeant in the back was like, "Hey, you've got those night vision, put them on, and we're gonna lean you out I was in the troop commander's hatch, so sitting behind the driver. We're gonna hang you out the side of the Amtrak, and so the Amtrak will block the lights from the traffic, and you put those night vision goggles on and put your CVC helmet on, hot mic, and you're just gonna say left, right to the driver." So here I am hanging out the side of an Amtrak, held by my ankles by some enlisted Marine, who's probably having like, well, we should just let this kid go.
Of course.
And I'm hanging out the side with these night vision goggles on, basically like telling the driver how to drive on that trail. It's pretty funny, but so yeah. And at that point I was like, this is cool. I like this, right? Because I was hanging out with all the enlisted guys who were having fun, right? So I guess if I'd hung around with the platoon commander, I would have been like, this sucks.
Yeah, right.
So
almost you kind of fell in love right then, right?
Yeah, I did. I mean, like I was like, this is awesome. And I got to drive around in an old Jeep. This was pre-Humvees too, like one of the old Willys Jeeps or whatever they were. And with the sergeant major, and I just remember being in awe of this guy because he was like, he was one of those guys that would chew on cigars and not smoke them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And Vietnam vet like my uncle was. And that was cool. And then that movie Top Gun came out, and I was like, "Ooh, I want to be a fighter pilot." So my dad was like, "Okay, well, you got to graduate from high school first. Then you need to go to college. So let's tackle that obstacle in your life right now because you're failing out of high school." And so I joined Navy ROTC at the University of South Carolina, and then figured out that the Marine Corps was the only service that will give you a flight contract. Like you guaranteed to go to flight school if you get this contract. So
really?
Before I got that. And decided I was going to be a pilot until my senior year in college. A really good friend of mine was killed in a mid-air collision down in Pensacola doing training. He was ahead of me. And I just decided there was no way I was going to be a pilot. So I
really right there, huh?
Yeah, that was it. I turned it in and went to TVS and got artillery. And I thought, I wanted to be an Amtracker really bad because that was the only experience I had. And so it's like, I want to be an Amtracker. My uncle he was trying to educate me on like how difficult it is for an officer in the Amtrak community. Cause like once you're done as a lieutenant, that community is just, you're a maintenance officer.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, yeah, I ended up as artillery, which was a great fit for me, man. I don't know how much you hang around with Army guys.
I've had my fair share.
We're a unique group,
for
especially in the officer. So it's like this is the other thing I really like about being out too is you start to share the stories with the enlisted guys about like what was it really like being an officer? What did we talk about? What did you guys talk about? All that kind of stuff. I know we have a lot more common ground than you think you do, but yeah, Arty guys are weird. Not weird. Well, some of them are. A lot of them are.
A little goofy.
Yeah. Well, there's this two sides of the artillery community, right? You have to be a good leader. And then you also have to be really technically proficient in this very technical thing, right? So you could be a really technically sound infantry officer, and being a technically sound artillery officer is it's a different universe, right? Because it's math and slide rulers and, weird calculations and charts and pins in the board and stuff like that. And So I actually like both sides of that, right? I liked the fire support side of it where you're out with the grunts, and then I like being in the back where you're calculating the data and doing all of that stuff and getting the battery from point A to point B. It was a perfect community for me. I don't think I would have been a really good infantry officer, to be honest with you.
Why?
Okay. So again, this is my recollection of 30 some years ago about why I didn't want to be an infantry officer, but the guys that were in my TBS class who were going to be infantry officers weren't my social friends.
Gotcha.
So I just didn't gravitate towards them as a group of officers, like the lieutenants, because when you're a TBS, you're all mixed up with each other and you kind of hang out. And I was like, yeah, I don't really like any of these guys. Turned out that was an incorrect assessment on my part. Most of the guys actually were really, really great guys. But when you're 22 years old, you kind of assess people's personalities based on how much do they like to go out to the bar and
for sure, right?
And the infantry guys were all serious, right? So Okay, this isn't, um, here's a great way to explain this. I was standing, you know who Tom Schumann is, right?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. So I was with Tom Schumann personally. We were at an eighth, I think there's a picture of us in my Instagram page on this too, but we were at an eighth and I parade together last year. And he was in his dress blues and I was in his, suit. And I'm standing next to him. And like literally the top of my head is below his chin, right? And I look at him and I'm like, and I said to him, I go, because he was posting a lot about um, a personality conflict that he had with the first sergeant. And it had to do with like he couldn't keep up on humps and everything. And I looked at him and I go, dude, I don't know how anybody could keep up with you on a hump. Like I would literally have to take 3 steps for every 1 step that guy took, which means if you're doing a 15-mile hike, you're doing a 45-mile hike.
Tall
right?
guys. Yeah, they leave you in the dust.
So yeah, I just like pumping like that. I was strong enough to do it, but man, I did not like it at all. I'm 5'8" and my legs are shorter than my torso, and it was hard.
Yeah, it's no fun.
Really,
the only thing that gets us through is just pure determination.
Yeah. I'll tell you the community that I ended up in that I would have really liked to have, if I was in this community, I probably would have stayed in, was the LAR community.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, when I went, I did 7 years on active duty, and then I got out and went back to graduate school.
Yep.
And in the course of that, I changed my MOS over to be a tanker because that's what the reserve unit was where I was going to graduate school. So I actually had to go to Fort Knox for a year. So become a tanker, a tank officer, and do some time in the tanks. My life was happening, and I was moving around a lot, and I ended up in DC. And
love it, love DC.
Yeah, I love living here. I had no intention of ever living in Washington DC until I just ended up in DC, and 20 years later, my wife and I are here, and that's it's home now. But the LAR community at the time would take a tank officer and let them be an LAR officer.
Oh, okay.
They didn't have the whole 0303 thing yet. They were developing it, but I kind of snuck into the wire. So I got to be a tune commander and an XO for a LAR company.
Nice.
That was a lot of fun. That was great. Yeah.
What do you think about them axing it, man? No more tanks.
Okay. So, oh God, I can really get my head lopped off of this. A lot of the, gosh, you can even ask me about the snipers too, if you want to. A lot of these decisions that are being made, okay, are being made by people who are really smart and have a lot of insight into what's going on with information, classified information that we can't even begin to imagine.
Honestly, to me, I feel like it's all logistical. China's up next. Those little islands, tanks are heavy.
That's it. And so I had one of my episodes is with Lieutenant General Carson Heckel, who's CDNI. And so I think he's CD, right? Yeah. Anyway, force design stuff, it falls on his plate.
2030.
And he was just talking. He's like, look, you have a tow. He started using howitzers as an example. And he said, look, you get a howitzer, right? It needs a prime mover. It needs a 7-ton vehicle to move it around. The thing weighs a ton, and the maximum effective range on a howitzer isn't going to do us any good in the littorals. We need missiles and things that can shoot. Like, so same thing with a tank. Like a tank can shoot out to 4 clicks ish, but whatever. My tanker friends forgive me for not getting that exactly right. But great. What happens if you've got a 70-ton vehicle sitting on a sandy island somewhere? And here's the thing that people don't get about tanks too. Like the logistics trail on a tank unit is immense. Fuel, ammunition. Food,
I heard you
parts.
ultimately become a mobile gas station. You know what I mean? Because you got to have something to refuel at, no matter where you're at. You got to figure out how to transpo all these things. Mm-hmm. I'd love to nerd out on this with you real quick because
sure, let's do it. I love
my last interview. I kind of I hit up a couple of staff NCO friends that I have because Force Design 2030 is something that's rattling around between the Lance Corporal underground to the staff NCO underground, and a lot of them it's not a good feeling. A lot of the staff NCOs don't feel that it's doable, it's possible. They really feel like logistics are not there. I don't know if that has anything to do with parts not being readily available like they usually are. a lot of the airplanes, the ships are down because they're broken. A lot of things can't keep up with the Marines. Essentially, China is up next. Let's be real. I mean, everyone's talking about it.
It's the most likely near peer adversary.
Yeah. So we got to be thinking about how to set up on small islands in small detachments, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to be self-sufficient enough to, be able to not collapse within being alone for, like, let's say a few weeks to a month. And out there, how do you do that? Seriously,
right.
it's a tricky thing when you actually break it down and quarterback it. I mean, talk to me.
Well, I think, fuck, I'm going to sound like an officer here. So you just go ahead and lop my head off when I say it, right? But like, it's our job as a Marine, our job, I'm using my air quotes, right? Not to be ready for what we want to have happen, but to be ready for what could happen.
Of course.
Right. So you're a 3 or a 4-star general, and you're up in the big, whatever. They're all hanging out at the Pentagon and making these decisions. And God, I'd love to be in a conversation there just to sit there and listen, right? But they're all sitting around talking, right? And here's what I know about these guys and gals that are generals, just from my time at the podcast, right? Like, they love the Marine Corps. They love this country. They're not idiots, right? They are in there making decisions that may not be popular, but they think are in the best interest of the Marine Corps 20 years from now, right?
Gotcha.
Anybody listening's just got to trust me. Like, these are smart people who are trying to make the right decision. So if you break it down, you don't get emotional about things, and you look at the resources that we have. I mean, the Marine Corps money can only go a couple places, right? It can buy equipment, it can pay for training, it can pay its people, and it can pay for infrastructure like barracks and stuff. That's kind of it. Maybe if you can think of something else, I'll bet you it could quasi fit in one of those 4 buckets, right? So if you want to spend more money on equipment, you're going to have to take it from somewhere else. Or if you want to spend more money on fixing the barracks, it's going to come out of training dollars or something like that. So there's this limited amount of money that goes around. And when they sit there, they're like, okay, where can we cannibalize some of the, this is what I think they're saying. Where can we cannibalize? And this is this whole divest to invest. And I get it. Like, I'm an artillery guy. I don't want to see tube artillery go away because I love it. And if the commandant's wrong, it's going to take him 10 years to rebuild a tube artillery infrastructure in the Marine Corps, because we'll lose all that staff NCO knowledge, right? Because, I mean, look, news flash to everybody. The officers aren't the one that understand that gun. It's the staff NCOs and the section chiefs that understand that gun, right? Yeah, it's true. Good artillery officers know that, right? Even the bad ones know it.
Yeah, right.
But so you get rid of tube artillery and you decimate a whole infrastructure of people and knowledge. Same thing with tanks. Like, if we ever had to bring tanks back again, where does that gunny come from? Well, if you bring tanks back in 10 years, that future tank gunny that the gunny that's going to have to be in the tank unit is a Lance Corporal right now.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Yep. So he doesn't know anything about tanks. All right. Sidebar that for a second. But I actually think that this whole concept of Force Design 2030 is 100% spot on right what we should be doing. I think that there's going to be some maturity that goes along with it. And there's going to be oh, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should do this. And let's tweak this and let's move that. And can
you do me a favor? Can you keep in mind, I just heard about it. I'm just figuring out what it is. Could you try to break it down to me in like a quick explanation so I can get the most out of it? How do you understand Force Design? What is the meat and potatoes, if you will?
Okay, I'm gonna quickly get myself in a lot of trouble here. I think Force Design is an idea or a direction that the Marine Corps is heading in, where we are going to adjust the way we equip the Marines, organize the Marines, and deploy the Marines in order to have forces standing inside the engagement area of that first island chain that are, I'm making up some words I'm slaughtering. So, General Berger, if you hear this, don't send me a nasty letter. But how do we do all of that in a way that we can have a meaningful projection of naval power inside the first island chain as the United States Marine Corps, right? So how do we do that? So let's just say, boom, we do it, right? We're 3rd Marines, people know that that's being reorganized. 12th Marines is being reorganized. Somebody else in there too, maybe. But the whole idea is, how can we put Marines, disperse them, and be able to actually fight in the first island chain? And you just can't take a tank company and employ them in the first island chain. You can't take an LAR company and really deploy them there. You can't take the 2 artillery there. So I think the layman's understanding of this is say, okay, well, if we're going to invest in these new organizations, in this new equipment, like the Naval Strike Missile and some things like that, they're calling it the Nemesis, and we're going to need some new gear. We've got to get rid of this old legacy gear that we're spending money on that we're probably not going to use. And so let's come back to the tanks. And it's like, all right, well, what's the likelihood that we need tanks in a fight in the first island chain? And I don't think anybody is like, yeah, we're going to need tanks.
Yeah, exactly.
What everybody's opinion there is, okay, but what happens if we end up like a war that nobody even sees coming, and we end up, falling back into the Fulda Gap somewhere in Germany or in Europe, right, fighting the Russians? Well, then we're going to need tanks. And the response there is, the Army's got a lot of tanks. So if the Marine Corps gets pulled back into a land Army situation, that we will probably be able to get an Army unit to come support us. And then everybody's like, well, never had that, we relying on Army. I'm like, well, people kind of forget Desert Storm when we had the Tiger Brigade attached to the Marine Corps. We had a whole brigade of M1 tanks attached to the Marine Corps for going over the berm into Kuwait from Saudi Arabia, right? Like, the Marine Corps doesn't have C-17s, but the Air Force shows up with them when we need to go places. So, I mean, we rely on other services all the time. So I actually think that this is a really smart thing to look at the equipment. And then some of the things that people forget about too. Now I am kind of capitalizing on my memory here, but when I came into the Marine Corps, we still had self-propelled artillery pieces.
What?
Yeah,
Really?
we had M110, which was the 8-inch howitzer, and we had the M109 self-propelled 155 howitzer.
Really?
Yeah, and so when they rolled into Desert Shield and Desert Storm, 511 was a self-propelled battalion. They had 3 batteries of self-propelled 09s and 1 battery of 8-inch. And by that time, the only reason they even had that was because it was still in the MPF shipping. So when all the stuff came off, they're like, oh shit, we've got 8-inch howitzers. They're pulling guys out of the brig to man those, guys that remembered how to use those things. So, I mean, here's another thing too, like back in the 80s, we had a tow battalion.
Really?
Literally, a battalion of Humvee mounted tows.
No kidding.
We had the tank company, the tank battalions had a tow company. And then here's something else. I need to go back and I don't know. I guess if I could ever have a conversation with General Neller or somebody like that, I would ask him this question. But where did the LAR battalions come from? So there was 3 of them, right? 1st, 2nd, 3rd. 29 Palms, Pendleton, Lejeune. Okay. Yep. Well, those we didn't plus up manpower by 3 infantry battalions to make. I mean, we got rid of something in order to create those LAR battalions. Nobody remembers what it was that we got rid of to make those LAR battalions. So when we say, hey, we're gonna get rid of 9th Marines, or we're gonna get rid of some of these infantry battalions because we're gonna create these other units, people forget that we have done this a million times in our past in order to mature and face the threat
the same thing we're doing right now. Gotcha.
Right. So
okay.
I don't see this as being all that new, but
gotcha.
Wow, there's a lot of people who disagree with me on that. And,
yeah.
I think it's smart. I think one of the biggest challenges that force design is going to have. So, what rank did you get out of? Did you get out as a corporal?
Yep.
Okay. So think about this for a second. Like, what these new Marine littoral units, right? They're going to fight in a way that isn't, 2 platoons up and 1 platoon back kind of thing. Well, how does a corporal lead that if he's never done that before? How does a sergeant lead that? How does a staff sergeant, how does a lieutenant lead that? How does a captain lead? Like, how are we training all this? So the answer to that is like, we need to mature the force, right? We need to get guys to stick in. All right, well, how do you get people to stay in the Marine Corps right now? So you got out and I got out.
Yeah, but didn't they just do the completely opposite of that? Like,
well, I don't know what they did or what they are doing.
It feels like a lot of guys, I mean, feel that I know personally feel like the Marine Corps has kind of pushed a lot of the alphas out. A lot of the when I say alphas, just the salty guys that did a couple to Afghan, a couple to Iraq, and it seemed like they didn't want them anymore, or they were going in a new direction. When what you just said is exactly you need those guys. I mean, you need those guys. So
let me ask it this way too: like, if those guys that you're referring to, because I really don't know the answer to your question, all I can do is kind of like debate,
speculate. Yeah, of course.
If all those guys wanted to stay in, they could have. They chose to get out, right? So the question is more about like, why did they choose to get out? Oh, okay. When you go to Parris Island or San Diego and you become a Marine, or an officer goes to Quantico and you become a Marine, like that's a serious investment, right? Like you just don't go to boot camp to try it out. You want to be a United States Marine.
For sure.
And you are willing to put up with the hardest boot camp and the hardest experience that you're going to have in your life up to that point in order to earn that title Marine. And then 4 years later, you don't like it anymore. Why? Well, there's probably a lot of reasons in there. But if you look at the big reasons, it's probably because a majority of the Marines that get out don't like it anymore. Oh, okay, right? Look, I got out, you got out. I got out because I wanted to do something else, and I didn't like it anymore. And if I go back to my times, I mean, like, I just putting up with stuff that I thought was fucking bullshit.
Yeah, of course.
I'm tired of it.
Yep.
Tired of being treated like a kid.
Yep.
So they're like, hey, we're gonna try. Actually, corporals and sergeants are the best example used for this, not a lieutenant. All right, great. We're going into combat. Corporals and sergeants are leading infantry squads and fire teams, and in some cases even platoons. Right, the senior sergeant.
Yep.
All right. So we trust sergeants and corporals to go out on patrol all by themselves.
Yeah.
With ammo and grenades and 203 rounds and belts and belts of ammunition. And we trust them, like, go from here to there and go do this mission. And we trust them to do that, right? And then we get back and you go over to Okinawa and they're like, all right, sergeants and below, you have to be, you're not allowed off base.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to drink out in town.
Great example.
So that's the maturity of the force that needs to take place, right? It's like, okay, if those corporals and sergeants are going to lead in this new, really disaggregated environment where, you could be thousands of miles away from a resupply, or you're truly out there on your own, like a LRP team in Vietnam.
LRP team, yeah.
And the most important thing to your survival is not getting seen, because there's no way, 6, 12, 14, you guys are going to fight your way out of anything. You're going to have some really mature people in there. So how do you mature the force? How do you get, Nick, when you're a corporal, to say, like, I want to stay in and do this? Well,
proactive. You need deployments. You need Muse. You need training evolutions. Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. I mean, you got to make them want to stay in.
Yeah.
For starters, and then you got to train them, right? So I think, and this is where my perspective as a civilian. So I have my own company. I have people that work for me, and I say this all the time. Like, my most valuable resource that I have in my company walks out of the door every single day at 5 o'clock, and I hope to God they come back at 9 o'clock the next day. Right. Yeah. So how do I make sure that the people that work there like working there? Well, there's a lot of creativity I can use in the civilian world to make people like their jobs more than the competitor across the street who wants to hire them. And it doesn't really have to do that much with compensation, right? So when my 10 people walk out the door on a Friday afternoon and they go off for the weekend, I'm not doing safety briefs. I don't have a 60-mile radius. I don't have like an inspection to make sure everybody's blinkers are working in their car and stuff, right? Like, I'm not standing up and saying, don't drink, don't, I mean, like, somehow miraculously, these people all stay alive and come back to work on Monday. Imagine that. So there's some component of the Marine Corps where we got to stop treating people like kids.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
But at the same time, the kids have to stop acting like kids.
Facts.
So it's not one or the other. It's going to have to be this sort of like, how do we reconcile this as a force? And that's what I think they mean by maturing the force. Like, right, how do we get some of the older people in there? So 27-year-old Dave Armstrong was way different than 22-year-old Dave Armstrong. It's just a fact.
Definitely.
Right? And so how do they get people to stay in? How do we create an environment where these people want to stay in? Well, I've got some thoughts on that. Like, I don't know, how about quit fucking with people in the barracks all the time with stupid field days and not allowed to have toasters and all that. Like, come on.
Little things.
Are you kidding me?
Come on.
You think I'm going in and doing health and comfort inspections of my 10 employees that work for my civilian company? Think I'm going and checking on their smoke detectors and whether or not they have a toaster in the room? I mean, like, we should probably start with just some self-realization that there is this massive difference between possibility and probability, right? And in the Marine Corps, when we create these rules and these regulations and that it's always trying to manage the risk of the possibility and not the probability, right? So,
well,
I'll just pause there. But
what would you think? I mean, at the end of the day, is the biggest thing that can be changed that would ultimately affect the most staff NCOs, senior enlisted, to stay in? Would it be empowering them? Would it be incentivizing? What ultimately does it come down to? Because we could speculate over barracks things or little things all day, but what really does it come down to?
So I don't know where it starts and where it finishes. I'm just gonna vomit ideas, right? And then maybe you and I can put together some sort of coherent thing. But first of all, I think we need to stop making people's lives so fucking hard, right? I'll use an example of this. Why can't we let people go out and do things on their way home when they're in camis?
Yeah.
Really? I can't pull over and quickly grab some milk for home or something like that. I can't fill my car up with gas. I can't pick my dry cleaning up.
We're definitely a stickler on the little things that doesn't do anything. Like,
so here's the historical context on that, right? So in the old days, those solid green sateen uniform, those were truly field uniforms, and Marines wore their Charlies every single day.
Oh, gotcha. That makes sense.
And so you can look at pictures of like Gomer Pyle and stuff. Like, they used to tuck them. Those green sateens were a lot like Charlies. They tucked them in the front and all that stuff, and they were heavily starched, and they were truly a working uniform. And there was no expectations of like keeping them super. They were okay. Then the BDUs came out, right? Like the uniform that I wore when I first came in, the tricolor, the woodlands, the things that are cool again. Okay, everybody wants.
Yeah, seriously.
Now. All right, so we had those, and the holdover from that was, well, you treated that BDU just like you treated that sateen uniform if you were in a garrison. Like, you would take it to the laundromat and get heavy starch. You would get this, and you could break the leg because there was so much starch in them. Right? Like, they were so heavily starched. And so it was this thing of, well, we were never allowed to wear the sateens out in town. Now that we have this BDU uniform, which, oh, by the way, everybody really likes it because it's super comfortable. You don't have to tuck it in, and you can move about smartly and freely in the area. But we said, well, because it's a replacement for the sateen, you're not allowed to wear it off base. Well, I'm telling you, like, when you wore those BDUs, your boots were shined, mirror shined. Like, your uniform was starched. If your chest pockets got unstarched and unstuck from it and started to bellow, you weren't allowed to wear it.
That's a problem.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so all of that stuff. It's like, gosh, I look better in my BDUs and I look at my Charlies where I look just as squared away. I mean, now if I'm going to the field, different story, right? I just think it's this holdover thing that we've clung to, and nobody's ever asked the question, why? Why? I mean, if you're in garrison, for the most part, you probably look decent in your camis, or you're getting your ass chewed. Right? I mean, like, if you're coming back from the field, it's a different story. But for the most part, we wear our camis look good. We roll our sleeves nice, all of that, right? So do we really look like shit out in town if you're stopping to grab milk or you're dry cleaning or whatever it is, something to be, or your kid at daycare or your kid at school or anything like that? Like, all right, so that's just one idea. Like, stop making people's lives so hard. How about stop ripping people's barracks apart every Thursday night for a field day?
Definitely.
I mean, you want to know the last time I took every piece of furniture out of my house and field day my house was? Fucking never.
Never. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, sorry, I'm speaking fuck a lot today, but
No, bring it on, bro. Bring it on.
So like, I think if somebody, if there could be some sort of like task force that gets together and say, what are some of the things that we could truly get rid of to stop making everybody's life so hard? People be like, oh, this is a lot.
Well, for example, I just saw on logistics that they are 156 staff NCOs short for this year.
Wow.
So what that means is they're definitely getting paid more in the private sector. So that's why they're not staying in, which means officers are having to do their work for them, which probably isn't getting done how it's supposed to be getting done. So clearly they're leaving for a reason, and we have to change something to keep them in. That's what it boils down to.
Right.
Now, being disgruntled is something, but there's clearly other things going on. Now, something I wanted to ask you about personally, because, you were an officer. I would love your opinion on the Afghan withdrawal. I talked to someone specifically. Did you see Sergeant Tyler Vargas?
Yeah, sure. I actually met him the other night too at the Marine Corps Awards, Marine Corps Heritage Foundation Awards dinner.
Stud.
I know, right? I mean, what an impressive spokesman.
You can't say enough about it. Just to have that positive attitude and outlook still. Right. I couldn't do it personally. Like, good on him. But
I don't know if I have an informed opinion that's anything other than emotional.
Do you
like my opinion is based on the media that I've seen,
because we don't know enough about it. You're right.
It seems to me like it was really fucked up. Okay. However, this gets me back to my, these general officers, they're not shitheads. They're not. So it makes me wonder how much of this was forced down somebody's throat.
You have to think that way. Yeah, right. I hear you.
That is my completely uninformed.
You're the second person to give me that exact answer. What's his name? The cognitive Marine I told you about that I had interviewed.
Yeah. Great
he
guy.
said he said the same exact thing.
I can't pronounce his last name.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
I don't want to butcher it. But he said the exact same thing. And we don't think of it because I don't know the officer side, but hearing it from you, and you clearly have confidence behind it, that's good to hear, because being an enlisted guy, we don't sit at the table. We don't get to come into the rooms and see the conversations that are had. We don't know, really only know, our OIC, and we know how capable he is. We don't know about the broad spectrum of things. So
yeah. Here's a thought for you though, because you just said this, but I can either ask you the question or I can say it. I'll ask you the question. What's the lowest ranking officer?
Boot lieutenant.
Corporal. Right? You're an officer. You just didn't have a commission.
I hear you.
So I have this theory that we have segregated officers incorrectly in the Marine Corps. Right? Like we'll say something like a staff non-commissioned officer, a non-commissioned officer. So what is the difference between a staff non-commissioned officer and a non-commissioned officer? Rank?
Yeah. But that's it.
Right. So the real difference between a lieutenant and a corporal is that one has a commission, which means something, and one doesn't. But at the end of the day, when you're out there in the field leading Marines, does that commission really matter? I say no, right? So when I hear people start talking about officers, I'm like, hey, Nick, you were an officer too. I just don't know if anybody ever made that point clearly to you. I'm grouping you when I say you, right?
No,
like,
I hear you.
So what if we said like, hey, what if I was if I was battery commander, right? And I said, I need to see all the officers in the back of the formation real quick. I would want to have everybody who's a corporal and above get out and have a school circle around me. And I feel like I'm talking to my officers, right? You guys are the leaders. You're the ones who have the authority to lead and give orders. And I expect you to have a level of maturity commensurate with that role that you have. Forget the black rank, forget the shiny rank, right? Like what we're talking about here is everybody in, I'm just going to use infantry company because it's high standard for everybody to talk about. It's battery's the same thing, but everybody has a role in that. A fire team leader has a role. A squad leader has a role. The company gunny has a role. And if we as a force stop looking at leadership through the lens of rank and start looking at it through the lens of roles and who's filling those roles, I think you get rid of a lot of the friction that exists at smaller units. Now, I think it gets different when you're at like a battalion or a regiment, because then you truly do have a staff there, right? Like the logistics functions and all that kind of stuff. But like at the leadership level, right? Like, I don't know, maybe one of the things that could be talked about more is the role of the officer. And if you're a non-commissioned, you are an officer. What does that mean? Right? Like, okay, hang on a second. I'm going to Google the definition of the word officer. Let's just see. Officer definition. And let's just see what old Webster's has to say about it. A person holding a position of command or authority in the armed services.
Okay. So I gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, I went off on a tangent there because you said
no, but I see what you're trying to say.
You're an officer too, though, right?
I never really thought of it that way.
Yeah, I don't think most people do. Wouldn't it be great if people did think about it that way?
Yeah.
So that kind of feeds back into your question, like, how do you empower these? I think they have the empowerment. I just don't think it's framed. I don't think leadership is framed properly. And it gets back to the, hey, E4 and E5, you have Cinderella Liberty. You have to be home at 9:30. You're not allowed to move out in town.
You're right.
Oh, but the second lieutenant can, because he's an officer.
We constantly have these contradictions. You know, we tell these guys that they have all the power in the world and they're big bad Marines, but then they go home to that. It's like,
yeah. So then, in order for that to work, there has to be a whole retooling of the expectations of accountability.
Big time, and no one wants to do that. You know,
and that's hard. Right. That's hard. I think another thing that could make, and I'm not an expert on how the blended retirement works, so I can only speak about this from my perspective. But when I was in, you didn't have the TSP and all this. It was either you did 20 and retired and got your paycheck for the rest of your life, or you got bupkis, right? So if you got out at 18 years, you got bupkis. So if you're in just say Marines, but any of the branches of service, and you're coming up on your 8 or 9 year mark, you're looking at that 10-year mark and saying, like, once I cross that 10-year mark, I'm a lot closer to the money than I am farther away from it. So now I'm all about making sure that I get the money.
Yep.
Okay. So what ranks are 10 years? Majors and staff NCOs.
Yeah.
Staff sergeants and gunnies.
Staff sergeants, gunnies.
You want to know who I think the biggest problem ranks in the service is? It's the staff sergeant, the gunny, and the major, because they're all managing their career to make sure they don't get kicked out. Back in my day, right?
Yep.
So really good leaders. I'm going to contradict myself and say officers. I'm just going to call myself, but like good staff and good sergeants and captains would get out at 10 years because they're like, okay, this was great, but I think I can go out in the civilian world and have either a better lifestyle or like I aspire to more. There's nothing wrong with that. So good people who see more for themselves get out. So there's that 10-year mark and a lot of people are like, well, I'm kind of cozy here. I'm comfortable here. I don't want to take a whole lot of risk and go start a business or something like that. So I'm just going to stay in the military. And then all of a sudden they go into this protection mode about, like, I got to protect my career. And every decision that they make is about managing the possibility and not the probability. Nobody wants to make a mistake. So you start rules and regulations and all this stuff. I just recently saw something on Instagram. I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody's making this comment about how they took a Humvee or a JLTV or something, and they put all this awesome screen on it and like really camouflaged it and everything. And then they were told they weren't allowed to drive it on the hardball road at Camp Lejeune because it was against the regulations to have that stuff on the side.
That sounds
and
right.
I'm like, that's about the dumbest thing.
Yep.
Like,
sounds like the
so we
Marine Corps.
have these rules and regulations, right? And if a sergeant came to a major and said, hey, sir, can you make a call on the spot that I can drive this vehicle on the road? That major's going to say, no way. I'm not risking my career over that. It's the same thing with a gunny, right? That kind of thing. So I think we would have to so I think the fact that if you have some sort of TSP or 401k and you don't walk away with nothing at year 13 and you really do want to get out, great. I also think it could help the evaluation process too, because as somebody who has written fitness reports, right? The last thing I want to do is write a double signed adverse fitness report that's going to end the career of a staff sergeant and ensure that he can't get to 20 years. I mean, that is
kick in the nuts.
You're like Atlas with the weight of the world on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And so what's the easy way out? Write him an average fitness report.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fine. It's not adverse. He gets promoted. Next thing you know, shipper lieutenant is now shipper captain. Shipper captain is now shipper major. Shipper major is now a battalion commander. Shipper sergeant is now shipper staff NCO. Shipper gunner, right?
Good point.
So that I think that could help out a lot too. But there would have to be a massive retooling of accountability,
which takes a lot of staff NCOs.
Yeah, it does. But then I come back to the Force Design 2030. I'm like, okay, well, if they're going to change these units around and they're going to make something, why don't they use this as an opportunity to kind of like reset expectations, reset accountability? That would be a great time
to do it. Yeah, you're
right. Like you're creating this whole new unit, you're creating this whole thing. Nobody even knows what it is. Make it now.
Yeah,
like
you're right.
Hey, Marine, you're in the Littoral Combat Regiment. This isn't 7th Marines.
Yeah.
Right. You are here for a reason, and we expect so much more out of you because you're part of this force design. We're inside the weapon engagement zone. Like, we are the first to fight in the Pacific Island Change. We have a higher expectation out of you from a maturity standpoint, a behavior standpoint. And if you fuck up, you are gone. And you know what? You're going back to 2nd Marines on Camp Lejeune.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm picking on.
No, but that's a perfect.
That's as far
that's
away
a perfect.
As possible, right? So nothing against 2nd Marine, sorry. But you get my somebody very far away. So like I have friends. Okay, it's super easy to make fun of the Army, right?
Of course.
They're awesome. I mean, look, the Army's bigger, which makes it seem like it's more messed up. Army's good. Like, there's a lot of great leaders in there. I think they have a culture that's a little bit different than ours. And I think we kind of laugh at things that they do, but they have reasons for doing things, and it's fine, whatever. But you get around the 75th Ranger Regiment, watch out.
Yeah?
Yeah, that unit is locked on,
No
right?
shit.
Like the 75th Ranger Regiment, if you're a corporal in the 75th Ranger Regiment, I mean, the expectations of you as a leader and as a mature, like, that's what the Marine Corps should be looking at as the model, is the 75th Ranger Regiment. Like, how do we create that sort of internal professionalism inside the Marine Corps that is a culture that is protected by everybody in the 75th Ranger Regiment? Like, they have to go to Ranger School, right? If you're in the 1st ID, you don't have to go to Ranger School, right? So the expectation there is so high. PT, they all cut their hair like wicked short. And they've got this culture of like, hey, you're a Ranger. We expect more. We hold you to a higher standard. Not because there is a higher standard. We're just saying that the standard isn't good enough for us. We're making a better one.
So it's like scalded into them from the very beginning, and it's expected, and they want to do it because it to them it makes them better to some degree than everybody else. It holds them to a higher standard in their own head. So
yeah,
I can,
and they're proud of themselves too.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I hear you there.
So do we solve all the problems? I mean, where are we with this? Do we have a white letter to send to
I think we have
Ramadan?
we have a good outline, you know. But you're right though. If any time to do it would be, you know, I mean, forced design. If they do pull it off, it would be a good time to implement changes like that.
Right.
When else would you? You know, like
yeah, right, exactly. But yeah, I mean, if a young, okay, I'm talking to the young lieutenants out there, but I'll talk to the young corporals out there too, like, or even a company commander, like, look, think about retooling the way you look at leadership and officers in your unit. And if you make people feel like officers and give them the authority to lead and hold people accountable and say, here are the standards for holding people accountable. Like, I don't want to see you bashing somebody's head through a window because they, were disrespectful to you. Like, there's a standard for behavior there too, right? But if you're empowered to take care of problems at your level and you do it in a way that's productive, maybe you can create this culture of leadership that goes all the way down. And look, Lance Corporals and PFCs, hey, sorry, you're not an officer, right? You are the instrument.
But it gives you something to work for.
Right,
but you
exactly.
kind of hit the nail on the head right there. I think if you want to make somebody shine, like in a lower rank, give them responsibility, give them a path to responsibility, if you will. I'll give you an example. My last deployment in Afghanistan, when my officer would ask us to go out to the patrol bases. He just needed a couple of Marines to go on patrols with the Afghans, just make sure they, we were locked in, that their PB was all good to go. I would volunteer. And at the time, I was just a young Lance Corporal. And, it empowered me. I was the only Marine out there. I was leading another Lance Corporal and a couple of PFCs, but it made me want to act like a sergeant, like a staff sergeant. It gave me that mindset. I could see it. I could see what it was, and it made me, perform. Ultimately, I wanted to impress and show that I was capable. So I feel like, if you want to make this standard, you create I don't even know where to go with that, because I mean, there really aren't a lot of deployments right now. Well,
yeah, but I mean, there's still training, right? There's still ways to exhibit the fact that you're a good, capable, and that you want to be a leader and you want to. And it makes me think, like, how many of your friends ever picked up meritorious sergeant?
One.
Yeah. So, okay. But inside the Marine Corps, they promoted more than one sergeant.
Oh, of course.
Right. So I don't even know what the numbers, but let's you and I just agree on a number that every year they promote 500 corporals to sergeant.
Okay.
Fair? Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever. The numbers are relevant. So there's like one per division per year, right? So there's 499 other Marines who are getting promoted to corporal in some other system. Right, cutting scores, boards, whatever it is, thing comes out, and these Marines get promoted. Well, I would offer that your friend that got promoted to meritorious sergeant was probably one of the best corporals in the whole division.
For sure.
Right. Okay. So I got an idea. How about this? How about if you're going to promote 500 sergeants a year, you go to the division commander and you say, I'm the division commander. But you go to the division commander and say, hey, of the 500 the Marine Corps is going to promote this year, we need you to find 75 of them. And the division commander goes down to his regiment and says, hey, here's 15 per regiment, and then there's 5 or 10 per battalion or whatever it is. And now the battalion commander and the sergeant major and the captains and the platoon sergeants are sitting there, and they get to pick who the sergeants are. I mean, who better to pick the sergeants than the people who are working with them every single day? Who's some guy at the headquarters Marine Corps with a list and a cutting score?
Yeah, exactly. You're right there.
Right.
For sure.
So, like, I don't know, maybe that's part of it too, is you push down the authority for promotion down to people who are actually working for them, and get rid of this whole, like, I don't know, whatever it is. And you just say, like, hey, battalion commander, you're responsible for finding 5 Marines in your battalion that are going to become meritorious sergeants, and you've got 6 weeks to hold a board and do whatever you want to do and talk to your captains or whatever it is. And then imagine if that battalion commander went down to each one of the company commanders and says, I need you're going to promote 2 sergeants out of your company in the next 6 weeks. And if you don't have 2 that are qualified, you're going to be in my office explaining to me why you haven't
Yeah,
developed.
that's the way to do it. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So, okay, great. But then now you've got this incentive for the captain to be like, well, I'm going to send up anybody because the last thing I'm going to do is stand there and say I haven't trained my Marines right.
True.
Great. And then if I was a lieutenant commander, I'd say this. And then whoever you nominate, every single enlisted Marine in their squad is going to write an evaluation on that Marine and tell me why they think he should or shouldn't be a sergeant. Now you should have this peer evaluation thing, right? Yep. I don't know. I think there's
no, that would definitely work well.
Yeah. So
I see that.
Then you've got then all of a sudden it's like people are like, wow, I could actually become a sergeant because I'm going to try.
That's what I mean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
because at first I was thinking a lot of people would bullshit that, but when you incentivize like that right there, when you show that it is possible, you could become like that's going to get shit done. I like it.
Yeah, I think so too. Probably do the same thing with officers too, to be honest with you.
But Dave, I got to put a bookmark in it for for right now. But what I want to do with you is I'd really like.
I know we didn't really have an agenda. We just hit record and started going. So
no, but I like our back and forth.
With this. Yeah.
I'd like to really talk PTSD, TBI, what's going on right now with that being in the Marine Corps, getting out, how the VA reflects with that, ways that we can get better at it, what we're doing right now. I'd like to unpack a lot of stuff with you because you seem very well versed. And I frankly, I'd like your opinion.
My opinion is kind of hard to form. So I was talking to my mom and dad the other day because a guy that I was lieutenants with, right? So my age, I'm 55. So we were buddies together. He just took his own life last fall. And I'm like, this is a guy with a family and kids, and he's been retired from the Marine Corps for years and years and years. Like, so the answer, Nick, is I'm not sure I know.
Yeah.
All I can do is share my experiences, and
that's all. If you don't mind, okay.
So I would say, what I was telling my parents the other day, like I have lost more friends to suicide in combat in the past 30 some years.
Yep.
Right. And at my age, I don't think it's normal for somebody my age to have lost so many people that they know personally. It's crazy.
It's wild. It's not just one thing, but I'd like to save it for a part 2 with you if you don't mind. So
sure, absolutely.
You want to do?
I'll think about it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna have a nice little specific questions for you. Do you want to do? Is this time usually good for you, or
Fridays are the best for me?
Fridays, okay.
As a starting point, right?
I could do Friday at 6, whatever you're available.
This Friday, I'll be at the coming back from the PD Abate Gala. I'm on the board of PD.
You're on the board. That's right. That's awesome.
So this Friday's back. It's also Memorial Day weekend, so I'll be coming back from New York, and then I'm just kind of falling in on my personal stuff.
We'll do the following.
Okay, hang on. Because I gotta make sure I don't double book with the recordings for my podcast. So hang on. Let's see. All right. I have 2 podcast recordings next Friday the 2nd. So I'll do it then. Friday the 9th is out.
I got the 23rd available. If you
16's not good.
I could do 16.
I could too, but let's keep looking too.
Okay.
23rd's bad. I will be out in 29 Pobs observing the CACs.
I'm sorry.
I'm so fucking old. The ITS.
No, we call it CACs.
Okay, all right.
Let's do 16.
I think that's the best because after that we're into July, and then it's like July 4th weekend, and then So, all right.
Call it 16. All right.
So
1800 or
so because it's a Friday, if I could be done by 1800, that's just more like cocktail friendly with my wife Friday afternoon.
Okay, I could be home from work at 4:30, so we could go for 4:35.
Okay, perfect. Now another option is if you wanted to do Saturday morning, I could do that too. But
I could do Saturday morning. I work.
I'd rather do Saturday morning that weekend actually.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So that's the 17th.
You want to do 9 o'clock?
Yeah, let's do 9.
You're Eastern time. Yeah, because you're Massachusetts, right? Okay.
Yep.
All right. And you're going to send me some questions or.
Yeah.
I mean, you said you were going to make a specific question about the suicide thing, right?
Yeah. I'll send them over to you a couple days prior.
Cool. Yeah. Okay.
So
and then what do you think, like an hour? What should I window it for?
Yeah, let's do an hour.
Okay.
So it's the 17th at 9.
Yeah. I get everybody right here. I'm recording with the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps on Wednesday.
No way.
Yeah.
That's huge, dude. Are you excited or what?
I am. I did one with him last year, and then this is like his retirement one. So it's his platform. Like I'm just letting him go.
Where's his head at? You know?
I don't. I talked to his Comstrat guy today, and the only thing we agreed on was that I wasn't going to ask him about his moments in leadership again because he already talked about his moments in leadership. So I have a funny feeling like he's like, I'm retiring, I'm going on blast, or I'm gonna like talk about what I shouldn't say going on blast. I'm going to talk about what I want.
Yeah,
to talk
exactly,
about.
exactly.
And it's going to be leadership, but who knows what it's going to be?
Of course.
I don't know. Maybe I can tune up on some of the questions that you and I were just bantering.
That's what I was just gonna say that, dude. I'd love to hear it coming out of his mouth, dude.
Yeah, I may actually throw that officer thing out to Adam and see what he says about that.
Definitely, that'd be big.
All right, cool.
All right.
We're
awesome.
off. We're off. We're. I mean, you're not publishing this part, right?
No.
Wrapping up. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, man. Thank you.